Hello and welcome. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to the IDSA Q&A session. We will start. I think we will start right now. It's the new year. A lot of people are still on vacation. Maybe some people will trickle as we will talk throughout the hour. But we will start because we have a lot to cover, and we want to have the chance to give you all the information. So let's start with a quick introduction. My name is Shani Tiran. I am part of the Impact team at IDSA. I'm a senior consultant at the Impact team. And our goal at the Impact team is to ensure that IDSA's work, which we will cover in the next hour, can translate into real-world impact. That means capturing feedback, offering help and guidance, tools such as this Q&A session, and pretty much facilitating the adoption of the IDSA standards and data spaces around the world. I also participate in R&D projects to sort of test and implement the IDSA's concept in quote-unquote real-life scenarios. So make sure they are relevant, make sure they are really useful as we think they are. And alongside with me, and I will pass the mic on to you, Anil, is Anil Turkmayali from our tech team.
Thank you, Shani, for the introduction, and good afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you are connected from. So my name is Anil. I'm from the Technology and Architecture team, where we are aiming to make IDS standards in the form of assets that are usable and explainable and understandable. So I'm involved in several activities on the technology side of things, and today I will be remaining at your disposal to answer any questions you may have on technological side of things. So back to you, Shani. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the way that we are going to try and conduct this hour that we have together is first we start with around 30 minutes of an introduction where we will try and guide you through the data spaces concept and what we are doing here at IDSA. It will be a lot of info, a lot of us passing along information for you, but a lot is happening and we want to share it with you. And you will get the slides afterwards as well as the recording. And we will also save time for Q&A, so you'll have the opportunity to ask your questions and hopefully get all the answers to your burning questions that you have. So I'm just gonna go right ahead and start. We can make it interactive, so please feel free. You can drop questions in the chat as well, and we will try to answer as we go along. And as I said, we will also leave time at the end for questions. So what I want to do is start with, before I'm diving into the complexities of data spaces and what they entail and so on, is why do we even talk about data spaces? Why this approach was even developed? So the data economy involves many players, and we kind of see that data sharing evolved through time from the very simple exchange of bilateral data exchange from one-to-one, and sort of as business cases became more and more complex, we saw the movement to closed community data sharing of few-to-few. And today we are at the point where there's an emerging need for decentralized and dynamic data sharing of many to many. So this shift is pretty much driven by today's business models, where data is pretty much part of every single point in the value chain. The interactions are complex. There are multi-stakeholders involved, and there's really a huge exponential growth of data. So it became more and more prevalent in order to actually unlock the economic potential of data to kind of change also the way we share data, the model of data sharing that we use. And so we see this need to move on to this decentralized model of data sharing. But we don't see a realization of this model in real life, or this potential of the so-called data sharing economy. It's not really happening in the real world. And in fact, and you can see it over here on the screen, 80% of industrial data is never used, which is a huge amount of data that is pretty much stays buried aside, and we don't lock the economic potential of it. And the reason for that is that there are concerns of trust and interoperability and control that people have that discourage them from sharing their data. So on the one hand side, we say that company wants to link data, but on the other hand, they want to retain control. So really what we need here is sort of a balancing act between the need to share data and unlock this lovely economic potential and really take part in today's economy. And on the other hand side, the need to maintain our control. Data today is one of our unique value propositions. So we want to stay in control of it even when we share it. And this is where data spaces approach comes into play. This is also where it differs from other federated sharing mechanisms because it provides this balance between these two needs. And the way data spaces do it is by allowing data sovereignty. And you can see here pretty much what the term means. And this is the idea of the ability to control the data throughout the entire sharing journey. So not only do I get to choose at the access point who gets the ability to gain access to my data, but throughout the consequent usage terms as well. So how can he access my data? On what terms? For how long? What can the other person or company do with my data, and so on? And that allows businesses to stay competitive and use their data while ensuring security and compliance. And how does it come to be? So the data spaces approach, and I will start with basically the term data spaces. What do we mean when we say data space? A data space is the sum of all endpoints that are able to share data with each other. So you can see from the get-go from this definition that we are not talking about any physical entity or any physical data integration. So as I said, it's a federated data architecture. Data stays where it is. We don't funnel all the data to one place. It stays with me until I decide exactly how and what do I share. When we say data spaces, we also talk about interoperability. So if we talk about endpoints that are able to share data with each other, we mean that they have no silos, there's no vendor dependency. Anyone that enters the data spaces and comply with the data spaces standards can easily share data with the other endpoints in this data space. We also mean, when we say data space, as I said, that you retain data sovereignty over your data. So as I said, control over your data throughout the entire sharing journey. And that includes traceability. So you will be able to see exactly how and when was your data used. You can backtrack that at all times. And at the end, this is a trusted ecosystem. So the only participants that enter these data spaces are trusted participants that ensures us that only those that are adhering to the same rules and standards are able to join. So once we enter, we know that we can trust everyone in this data space, even if we don't have a specific familiarity with that participant. And all of these principles that are part of a data space directly address those concerns that we talked about in the previous slide. And so when we talk about data spaces, we really talk about the active ability to decide, do we plug in or not? Because interoperability and trustworthiness, these are not principles that are achieved ad hoc. Participants need to make an informed and conscious decision about their partners and components, about the access and the usage of their data. So we really decide, do we plug in or not? We really decide, do we want to enter the data space? Do we want to share data? And do we trust the other participants in the data space? That's what data space allows us to do. And so if we sort of understand the concept of data space, how does it really look like? So I will start with a very general, simple graph. And you can see here at the two endpoints, maybe I can take the laser pointer, you can see on the one side the data owner, on the other side the data user, and each of them can attach their usage policy regarding how they are willing to share data. And they can connect to the data space through the sort of getaway point, which is the IDS connector, which allows them, once you use the connector, you are sure that the other participants are also adhering to the same standards and comply with the same rules. And in a data space, other than the participants that share the data, you can see other components. This really depends on the needs of that data space, how complex and how many components there will be. And there are many components. I will not get into each and every one of them, but I will also explain where else you can read about all of these components. So you can see a broker and a clearinghouse and so on. These are all components that are available to be added to a data space, but it's not a rule that you have to have all the components. It's really, the idea is that when you define a data space, you do it basically based on your needs and your own business model. And so if we take a look at the next slide, we can also see a second example, or a more schematic example from real life. This is an example from Industry 4.0. And so if in the last graph we talked about one data owner, one data provider, and the other side that gets the data, this is really, it doesn't have to be obviously just two participants, and the abilities are endless, basically, of companies that can take part of this. So you can see here, company 1, company 2, and so on, company N+1, and so on. So really, any company that complies with the same rules and standards can take part in a data space. And you can see here, they all connect, and this is those blue dots over here. This is the IDS certified connector. This is, as I said, the gateway to the data space, ensuring compliance with the standards. And the usage policies are attached to these connectors, allowing controlled and trusted data sharing. And every entity in this data space, you see the companies that want to share and get the data, but we also see over here, for example, the data marketplace, the other components that we can have in a data space. Each and every one of these entities basically is connected through the IDS connector. And taking us from the schematic graphs to some real life examples, and I will just briefly mention them just to show the variety of examples and needs the data space can help with. So one example, the Basque Energy Cluster. This is a digital platform for sharing real-time operational wind turbine data. And it is done using IDS connector and IDS broker, and it allows to link data owners and the data sources with a marketplace and on the other side. So this is basically an example which is very, in a sense, restricted to very specific need. It's a use case, basically, a very specific need in a very specific region. But we can see that a data space can be more complex and include many, many different needs and usages, such as DASLogis. This is the Dutch data space for logistics, where they use IDS connectors, and they are offering real-time visibility to sensitive data to the logistics sector in the Netherlands as a whole. So this is a step forward in the complexity of the data space and the amount of participants. And we can see another example. This is one of the more mature examples of data space that we have today. It has almost 200 members in the association. This is Catena X. It is a data space in the automotive sector, and the goal is to create a uniform standard for data exchange along the entire automotive value chain. And they use the IDS standard as the blueprint for the data exchange. So we moved from very sectorial, very specific sort of thing to a general big data space that each company can use for its own use cases and its own business needs. And it's, as I said, it's just to kind of show you the different approaches, the different abilities you can have with a data space. And I will also mention later on where you can read in more detail about each and every one of these examples and much, much more. And so if we understand what data spaces are, hopefully by now, what do we at IDSA are doing? So IDSA, the International Data Spaces Association, we are a nonprofit organization, and we aim to establish global standards for data sharing. Our members, as it says here, are the backbone of IDSA. We have around 190 organizations that are members of IDSA worldwide. And you can look at the logos over here, and it's really very wide variety, from small startups to large corporations, research institutions, universities, and so on. So it's really with a diversity of expertise and global spread as well. And all of these members are working together towards the goal of establishing this global standard for data spaces and for data sharing, meaning we don't decide on the standards on ourselves. We don't develop the concept on ourselves. This is not something we do off the top of our heads in our offices in Dortmund. It's a collaborative work with our members, and that ensures that the standards really, really hit the nail on the head when it comes to what are the needs of the field. Our responsibilities in IDSA in that can be categorized into sort of three main pillars. So one is coordinating these activities of the community and enabling the community to come together and create the common guidelines that we refer to as the IDS standard. We also manage repositories. This is our GitHub repositories, and they are really a treasure trove of information when it comes to data space, because you can get their specifications and technical documentation, open source implementations, and so on. A lot of this is open source and open for everybody. Some things are members only. And we also are in charge of community management. We know the community of data spaces. We are working with them hand in hand, day to day. And so we try to help with networking, with matchmaking, with creating strategic alignment, and so on. Some of our assets or the tools and approaches that we provide to this data spaces ecosystem. So we have what we refer to as this magic triangle, and this is a holistic framework for data sharing. These are the key IDSA assets that enable the creation of reliable data spaces. So the first one is the IDS reference architecture, and this is a detailed blueprint for creating data spaces, and it's really, really useful as basically a roadmap for creating data spaces. The certification scheme, on the other hand of the triangle, it ensures conformity to the reference architecture and to the standards. And thus, you know that you can trust the partners and the components in a data space because they are certified. It's specifically worth mentioning here that there are 6 certified IDS connector that you can see on our website, meaning these connectors adhere to the IDS data space standards. And on the last end of the triangle, as we mentioned already, the portfolio for open source building blocks. This is part of the of our GitHub repository, containing a lot of practical tools for implementing data spaces and components in real life, in commercial setups. And you can also sort of see the IDSA rulebook sort of hovering above, if you imagine it as a 3D sort of thing, sort of hovering above the triangle. And this is a guidebook, basically, that provides the governance scheme. So it helps define the needed structure, the needed processes for implementing the IDS reference architecture in real life. And collectively, all those components enable us have confidence in data sharing within a data space. And maybe this is the perfect getaway to move on to Anil, where he can talk about the data space protocol and why it's another really important asset that is needed.
Thank you very much, Shani, for the introduction and the handover, and hello again. So, yeah, as just as Shani explained, so we have all these constructions or developments that are going on to build data spaces and so on, and it's also important to standardize how the data is shared between parties, right? I mean, there are at least two parties involved in a data sharing activity, and then there are a lot of problems that are coming on, like in terms of interoperability, the sub-layers of interoperability and incompatibility of the standards or terms that are not clear to each other. So we have this fragmented structure still in the world of data spaces, and still a lot of things should be solved. And number one is interoperability. That's as you probably know a lot, and you are confronting these problems. So we need something like a protocol that is similar to what HTTP did for computers to connect to each other over the web, or what SWIFT did for international banking operations. So, or GSM or Bluetooth. So if you check all these examples from before, there's still the same model. Like there are parties who want to exchange something, but still there is no universal way or a methodology or a process that dictates them how to do that. So that's the problem. And the data spaces, they all require also some data sovereignty to be involved in this data sharing processes, interoperability, and they also need scalability for future scaling of data operations, and trustworthiness should be ensured between the participants of the data space, right? So we have a wide variety of problems. In one hand, the data space protocol is just a way to standardize the data sharing that is happening between the participants of the data space. So it's an experiment that is going on, and it's on its way to become an international standard in the other hand. So it's actually having quite a modular architecture, where the separation of the control plane and the data plane is quite clear, because this is like the primary need of the data spaces when it comes to scaling. So once you implement a very successful control plane or data plane, then you can also take it to the other examples and pivot it, or make it possible that it's also existing in other implementations of yours. So on the other hand, sorry, by the way, I think I'm not sharing the right slide, so terribly sorry for that. Okay.
Yeah, no, sorry, take it again. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Shani. So this is actually what I meant by the separation of the control plane and the data plane, and then we have. So as you know, sorry, are you able to view the writing? I'm not sure about it. So maybe now it should work, I guess.
Yeah, we are seeing the slide. It's the layered model for interoperability slide. We're seeing it perfectly.
Awesome, perfect. So we are following this new European interoperability framework for layered approach here. Like, so we know all data space implementations needs to solve these problems on the legal level, organizational level, semantic and technical. And it's possible to say that the data space protocol is providing the basis for the technical and semantic interoperability, just because so it's not solving the entire problem, but it's just providing the basis for that. Because for the technical interoperability, so it's providing a way that the data is exchanged and the standard set of messages between parties, and on the Of course, it can be extended to according to the custom needs of the participants. And on the semantic level, it's providing the use of globally used standards like the ODRL or some other stuff. And then you also can extend it with your domain-specific data models or ontologies or stuff like that. But it's just providing the basis for the semantic interoperability as well. Anyway, we need to standardize the exchange of data between parties. And it's consisting of three layers, like protocols that are under data space protocol. The first one is catalog protocol, where the data provider is making braided the data sets and listing them according to a standard, and then contract negotiation happens between parties, a type of messages are being exchanged, and then the transfer process protocol is taking care of how the data is transferred to the potential consumers. So it's not a protocol that has been drafted in our ivory tower office in Dortmund in international data spaces. So it's a work of our network, just like everything else, and it came out like as an outcome of a natural need from the industry itself. So there's a lot of parties involved in its code definition work, and also a lot of initiatives are currently using it or adopting it, and this is also providing a perfect feedback mechanism for us. As well as some Horizon Europe projects that IDSA is also involved in. So are embracing data space protocol that are providing good feedback for us. So basically, in brief, data sovereignty is maintained by allowing the data providers to be able to enforce their own usage policies, and technical and semantic interoperability is achieved through an infrastructure that provides standardized data exchange formats between parties, and growth and scalability are supported by the clear separation of the control plane and the data plane. And so, as I mentioned, it's providing a foundation for the technical and semantic interoperability that is needed for the data exchange. And currently, it's also being, there's a specification project as part of the Eclipse Foundation that I can share the link in the chat. So where the specification work is being carried out, and currently we are waiting for the submission to ISO JTC1. So it's on its way to become an international standard for data sharing. So that's really the best part of it, and because it will also provide some kind of stability for several years for the standard itself. So we don't really expect too many changes after it becomes an ISO standard. So that's it from my end, and I'm happy to follow up with the questions.
Thanks, Anil. So I just want, before we really open the floor for questions, to go over a few more tools and assets that we have, and it's worth knowing, that are maybe less on the technical side. So the first one of those is the data spaces radar. I showed 3 examples of use cases and data spaces early on. And the data space radar is the place, the tool where you can check out these use cases and many, many more, because we try and collect this very overachieving goal maybe of collecting all information out there of data spaces and use cases from around the world. And the way that the radar is constructed is that the more, you can see this graph that we have over here, is that the more mature use cases and data spaces are closer to the center. But it's not just a pretty graph. So each and every one of those examples you can enter and read much, much more information about, and sort of tailor the reading to your needs, because you can use a lot of advanced search and filtering tools to find out exactly what you are searching for and is interesting to you. So really, I urge you to go and take a look. And also, if you are developing data spaces, it's worth mentioning that this is a community tool. So entries are based on user submitted information. And this is my place to also encourage you to drop your use cases and data spaces in the radar. There are already 184 entries. There are actually 185, if I'm not mistaken, already. And it spans, as you can see here, throughout different sectors and domains. Many in manufacturing, because that's where data spaces really started, but we see the spread is getting larger and larger for the other sectors as well. We also have a strong network of international partners, hubs, competence centers, and labs, and they share knowledge and information about IDS and data spaces in countries around the world. They are sort of the national champions in their own countries, I would say. And this is another place where you can get resources, guidance, localized in your own language and related to your own country's data spaces ecosystem. So each and every one of those maybe provide a bit of a different portfolio of tools and guidance. Some develop more research and development projects. Some help with coordinate data spaces, other create components, foster awareness, and so on. But this is a local champion in your own country that you can also utilize in your data spaces journey, basically. We also recently launched a training program where you can get an IDSA professional certificate, meaning you can go do a training that, we are not providing the training, but we do provide the syllabus. So when you go and use such a training course, you can be sure that it complies also with the standards and it holds everything that we think is important for that specific certification. At the moment, and you can browse the training catalog, the one course that we have is Data Space Fundamentals, but this will be enlarged. There will also be business on a course on the business side and a course on the technical side of things. This is in development right now with our members of IDSA. And it's also worth mentioning that if you are a training provider, that's also a channel that we can cooperate with, meaning you can provide this training course according to our syllabus. And at the end, we are providing the exam. So at the end, and the participant know that that participant passed an exam that was standardized by us. It's an IDS sort of badge of honor of your professional knowledge. And so I will go over this slide very briefly because I see that there are already questions and I want to have time to answer everything. This is sort of like very big and complex slide that kind of takes everything that I just talked about and put it in one place, all our assets and tools, sort of showcasing the holistic approach where we try to be in all stages of this data space journey. So from the very early stages of adoption all the way to full adoption. So if we start on the very left-hand side, aligning architecture and thought leadership on data spaces. That means that in order to have like prosperous data spaces, we need to have a very clear architecture, because sovereignty and interoperability are only possible with well-aligned infrastructures. If we talk different languages, obviously we don't have interoperability. And so this is one of the main things that we are doing here. And you can sort of note the research projects that play a critical role in that, because this is one of the places that we work with real-life examples in testing these alignments. And here I would also specially mention the Data Spaces Support Center, which is project that works on a key initiative, I would say, that works on aligning these biggest driving forces in the ecosystem. And if we move on to the next stage of promoting open source solutions, as you can see, so the foundational infrastructure that we do in the first place is brought to life through open source solutions. So I already mentioned the GitHub repository that we have, and the ability to get IDS certified data connectors, and these provide you with a trusted option for implementing standards. And here I will also want to specifically mention that we also have a periodic connector report, where you can get information about all the new connectors and existing connectors in the market. And these tools lead to the creation of successful and impressive data spaces. And what we try to do here is provide you details of use cases, success stories, shine a light on really the impressive data spaces that you can learn from. And here I already mentioned the data spaces radar, where you can find tons of more information about each and every one. And in the last step, we are driving, and Anil mentioned this, global standardization for widespread adoption, so collaboration with ISO, as Anil mentioned, but also Sensenelec, IEEE, and so on, to ensure international alignment with the standards. And all of these together, hopefully, from the very, very foundational alignment to all the way to the global standardization, help propel data spaces ecosystem into the, I would say, prosperous future that we hope it will have. And with that, I will move on to wrap up and to the questions, because I think I already took a look at one of the questions, and I think they lead directly to my ending remarks. So please feel free. Let's take some time, and you can drop questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will also feel free to raise your hand, and we will give you the floor for your questions. There are 2 questions in the chat, and I see, Anil, that you already created comments, so maybe we can also talk about them for a minute. I will move on to you then.
Sure. So I will start with the earliest one. No, both of them are asking at the same time. So thank you for the question. So first of all, so the first question, what do you think will the near future, for example, next 5 years of data spaces look like in terms of technology acceptance and market share? So this is purely my personal opinion, but I think there are some commonalities with the IDS approach as well here. So I think, I mean, I see 3 steps here. First, the rise of adoption, so that the more and more usable solutions will emerge, and usability will be a really important concept for the use of data spaces and data sharing mechanisms and so on. So I also provided this example of Netscape Navigator, like in the first years of internet. So there was this infrastructure and everything, but no usable thing that will increase the end user adoption or the more and more like regular people to use the data sharing mechanisms. The second one is the need and the rise of standardization, especially for the need to enable the cross-sectorial data sharing, which is quite important because this is how the business is made in real life. I mean, the different sectors are coming together and creating some innovation or innovative solutions. So this should be the same in the data sharing ecosystem as well. And third, the regulations and the state, how they are positioned. So we see more and more that most of the states in the world are in the defensive position, like when it comes to sharing and doing something or doing some kind of innovation. And I think that will be more flexible. This is purely my personal opinion, as I said, and some forward-thinking states will try to drive the data sharing and the data economy by offering some pragmatic and ready to be used kind of solutions, or states coming together and creating some kind of common regulations or regulatory frameworks. So that's purely my clairvoyance, as I said.
If we go back to the first question, just like a small addition from my side, we have this in this view of, if you know, of the adoption cycle. This is where we think we are at the moment. Somewhere we moved on from the innovators to the early adopters. We are now somewhere here. We have yet to cross the chasm to widespread adoption. So we are still not there, in our opinion. And I think Anil already mentioned the steps forward, and I think the ISO adoption, the stability of the protocol, and then stability of tools tools and components that will come with it, will be able to provide this widespread adoption. But we know that we are not there yet. We are just at the cusp of getting there. I hope. Just as an addition to that question. And I see now that there are already other questions here. So Anil, there are two questions. Maybe I will move those to you as well regarding the data space protocol and the RAM.
Sure. So I will start with the question from Matif Barkov. Let's say a small medium enterprise in that supplies a big OEM has to use Catena-X. So the OEM can use traceability, CO2, or other use cases. Does the standardization in the Catena-X that the SME has to adapt to in their data infrastructure governance also align with the use case for in a healthcare data space? So Catena-X is a good example that adopts data space protocol, and so there are many other initiatives as I've shown in the slide. So I don't know about the healthcare data space that could be playing a role in this kind of scenario, but it's possible to say that after data space protocol becomes an ISO standard, so that could be like the way forward for all data space initiatives that are going to apply. So that's going to be like the #1 standard that they should apply, so that after that, I think we won't have any more problems and no more updates for several years at least to the needs of the industry. Please, Shani.
Thank you. There is a question regarding, I don't think we provided answers. Has the data spaces protocol already became an international standard? Actually, I think you mentioned that. And when will RAM 5 be officially released? And are there any major changes from RAM 4?
Yeah, so I would say I will start with the data space protocol one because that's the part that I'm more informed about. Yeah, the ISO committee submission is on its way. I mean, there are a lot of formatting and reorganizational issues, and we expect the publicly available specification to be submitted this year and made available this year. But I think it will take some time, and we expect some action in the upcoming months on that end. The question about RAM 5. So there are some changes. There are some changes that so we want to release some kind of information sheet about this issue, but it will be, I think it will come in the upcoming weeks, saying the main differences between RAM 4 and RAM 5. But basically there are some updates and also some renaming of the components, and also some changes in some components and some procedures, and also in its structure. So it's made to be more flexible and more open for contributions. So I don't know if you are already having access to the repository. So it's open for members that are part of the architecture working group. So in the repository, you can see the list of issues and everything which is more transparent.
Okay, Anil, there's another question that I'm going to pass this one to you as well. Maybe you are aware. Any solution over sharing big size data over the data space? For example, the 3D model structure of certain protein might be over terabyte in file size. And what is the rule, strategy, function to prevent data being shared to another third party? So 2 questions.
Yes, so 2 questions. Yeah, so the first one is a scalability issue, and this is something that IDSA is not 100% getting involved in. But we are just trying to define the rules and the framework and the standards about the data sharing stuff. But in a lot of use cases, we have this kind of scaling or operational issues that are related to scaling or dealing with big size data. So yeah, it's possible to say that we don't have really something that refers to those kind of things, but we need to list more and more best practices so that people can learn from each other, so the initiatives as well. And what is the rule, strategy, functions to prevent data being shared to another third party? So there are some mechanisms that are blocking this or preventing this to some extent. So first of all, there is IDS certification, which is conducting the certification in the data space. First, ensuring that everybody has a trusted connector, which is certified. And secondly, the operational environment is reliable. So it's making the certification, it's conducting the certification in 2 dimensions. And first is the connector and the second is the operational environment. And in addition to those, there is also this identity provider, which is a component in the data space that is pretty much acting like the bodyguard in front of a private house, like not allowing the unallowed inside. And that's the second thing. And the third thing, maybe partly the database governance authority, the authority or the association or the mechanism that manages the issues within the data space. So when disputes are happening between participants or when just before it's taken to the court, the thing that gets involved in this kind of mechanisms. But of course, there is no universal standard on how a data space is governed. There are many different examples on that and many different models as well. But basically, it's possible to count these 3, like certification, identity provision mechanism, and the data space governance model and the authority, I would say.
Thanks, Anil. Are there any other questions before we continue? Okay, hopefully we managed to answer all your burning questions. You can always contact us afterwards with the new questions that come to your mind as well. I will then take the last few minutes to show a few more slides of where you can reach us and work with us and get updates from us other than this session. So first of all, as we said, we're not creating these things on our own. You can co-create with us. Important to say this is for IDSA members only. So we have the working groups. This is the place where we create these standards and essential assets. So we have 4 working groups that meet quarterly. The working group architecture, this is where we develop the architecture and the RAM. You can see that we have bi-weekly meetings regarding the RAM 5 and bi-weekly meetings for the data space protocol as well. And there's also a monthly sub-working group that deals with personal data and how it translates in a data space and the specific challenges regarding that. Working group certification that meets quarterly and works on this certification scheme. Basically, with sub-working group for test bed and for testing that meets monthly. Working group rulebook for the governance scheme that also meets monthly, and working group training, which is the newest working group that deals with the training scheme that we talked about, and actually creates together the syllabus for what entails for good training, and meets monthly. We also have task forces. These are open for everyone. You don't have to be an IDS members. These are a bit more ad hoc, I would say. Task force that deals with legal framework regarding data space that meets quarterly. Task force specifically in the energy domain that deals with energy interoperability that meets monthly. And task force, quote unquote, China deals with the specific challenges and the Chinese ecosystem that also meets monthly. Just a second. I want to show a few more things, but my slide just got stuck. See? Oh, okay. Another place where you can get updates and information. This is also open only for IDSA members, unfortunately, or fortunately. It's the IDSA Ecosystem Building Call. It happens every week, Monday at 9 a.m. CT time. More business focused and strategic, maybe it delves into the technical details, but it's more business focused. And this is the place for members to share best practices, start discussion, present their projects, and so on. And it's really a really useful point of contact and information to stay up to date with this ecosystem. Two specific events that are happening soon and might be worthwhile to know, and maybe if it's relevant to you to check out as well. The first one is Data Sharing Festival from February 4th to 5th, so next month in The Hague. This is organized by TNO, which is our hub in the Netherlands, but it's supported by IDSA and we're done very much in collaboration. And the second place where you can meet us, this is an IDSA event together with the Data Spaces Support Center, the Data Spaces Symposium. It will really be, I can already say, the biggest data space event of the year. So really, if it's of interest to you and you can come meet us there, it will be in Warsaw, 11th and 12th of March. You can also find much more information and see IDSA in action. We have an archive of a lot of talks like this one and many, many more focused on tech talks, some update session and so on. Feel free to check out the archive and get tons of more information there. And lastly, in our LinkedIn as well. Stay up to date, follow us, and you can get the most recent information in your feed. And if all of this is of interest to you, this is my place to invite you to join us, join the Data Space Pioneers, co-create with us, and enjoy also, hopefully, all the assets and help that we can provide you in your data space journey. Becoming a member is really, really easy. And we also have here in this chat, Anna Daravianko, which is the manager of membership at IDSA. I think she already dropped a line in the chat. So you can feel free to contact her as well with any question about memberships, and she would be happy to help. And with this, unless there are any last question, we are 4 minutes before time, so there's a place for one more question or so on. But with this, I will wrap up with the words, data sharing is better than playing alone. Hopefully this hour sort of convinced you that this is true. And so I want to say thank you as well for joining us. And hopefully we will hear from you on, and we are here to help with anything and any way.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. I see there are no more questions, so I think we will wrap up. Feel free to contact us for any other details as well. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a great day.